Hello, my name is John Cofrancesco. I'm from Fortress Information Security. Very pleased to be joined by Mike Baker, the CISO of GDIT. Mike, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, John. Thanks for having me on. It's been a fun week, to say the least. We're coming upon a Friday afternoon, but something tells me we're all going to be working into the weekend here this time. So thanks for having me.
Well, yeah, we're all facing the log jam, otherwise known as the log4j issue. It's a pretty special time to have a CISO on the phone and to be able to join us here. So could you tell me just a little bit of what's your day like right now? What are you facing? What's an organization like GDIT having to get squared away right this second?
It's a complicated question, right? So, I didn't get to introduce myself, so I'll just do that now, right? I'm Michael Baker, as you mentioned, CISO for GDIT. And in that role, I have all of, the normal stuff, cyber operations, in this case, vulnerability management, risk management, architecture, so on and so forth. So, I think, interesting in this particular, situation, right? We have a 0-day vulnerability, we have exploits in the wild, and additive to that is we have a significant amount of press. I think rightfully so. We have press, John, in terms of what's going on here. So we have a lot of attention, right? I think we have a lot of executive attention on this in terms of the risk that it poses to the business. I think we have a lot of technical attention on this. And we have a lot of attention as it relates to our supply chain and how we're engaging our vendors. So really my day to day is attempting to kind of pull those activities together into a strategy to get us to good as quick as humanly possible, right? With the knowledge that we have at this point in time, which is Friday, pretty much a week into this mess. So the day to day here is really just from a CISO's perspective is making sure that the different parts of the organization are operating effectively, they're working well together, and we're really realizing kind of speed to remediation. That's really my primary focus.
Yeah, so Mike, when I've been talking to folks in the field and sort of hearing a lot of what you've just described, and I think normally when we face a 0-day or some new vulnerability, there's this moment of, oh, I have to begin triaging things. And I think what's made this difficult for a lot of people is what we've been hearing, and I'm curious to get your perspective on this, is that everybody is so dependent on that triage, not internally, but to come from their vendors outside, that they're kind of waiting to be able to do what they would normally do.
Yeah. I mean, look, you're my brother in SBOM, right? Full disclosure, you and I talk about SBOM all the time, and I think that's one of the frustrating elements of this particular situation. Is one, the hits keep on coming. Let's back up a little bit, right? The non-technical elements. So when you get to the people side of the house, right, the hits just keep on coming here. 2021 has been a tiring year, and I think it's like every time we get to a holiday weekend, we're like, oh man, when's this shoe going to drop? Or when we get closer to Christmas, I mean, I believe this Log4j was right on like the exactly 1 year anniversary for SolarWinds. So, I'm really looking forward to Christmas getting canceled 2 years in a row. My family's thankfully pretty forgiving for that. But the first and foremost, when I look at it and it drops, I think of the teams, right? The people that have to work another weekend. They have to sift through a million logs. They have to process a ton of cyber threat intelligence and stuff coming at them, try to get some high fidelity things and actually start to hunt for the threats, hunt for the vulnerabilities and direct patching teams where they need to. I think that's probably my number one thing that goes through my head is, oh man, again, I know we all love this, but we also it's getting tiring. Exchange, SolarWinds. We've had a number of 0 days come out in the last couple months. So I think it's been tough on everyone, cyber teams, but I don't want to leave out my IT brethren too, right? They're the ones that are here with us on the phone patching over the weekends, right? Furiously patching Friday night and into Saturday morning. So I think across the teams, it's really tough. I think the second aspect of what you really alluded to was contrary to some previous events, some 0 days, there wasn't like one vendor that we could look at and then deduce what it is, right? This is an underlying module, Apache Log4j, and we know where it's used, where it's reported, but I think we're all under no delusion that that's the only place it's used, or that's not the only place where this vulnerability is going to rear its ugly head. And then I think we get into a measure of let's do what we can now with an eye towards saying that this probably isn't over and it's probably going to last significantly into the new year. And then a little bit of helplessness is the wrong word, but my desire is always to be proactive and attack the problem. But right now, I think we're really waiting for the software community to come together and understand where they use this particular module and how it could affect their products and whether it's exploitable. And I think from that perspective, I know what to do now, right? You know what to do now. Pick up the phone, write letters, urge constant communication. But man, it would be really good to be able to do a search based on where this module is used. I know between you and me, and I think you're aware of this, between you and me and the podcast audience, is I think we're still a few years away from that mature capability. But I am excited that we're moving that way because I want to control, my team wants to control our own destiny here. And we want more things that we can pull on to really get to the problem,
So, you bring out two, I think, important subjects. I'll kind of take them on separately. At Fortress, we blew through about 250,000 unique pieces of software that over the weekend. That's from the Friday to the Monday. My guys called me up. They're like, we're certain this stuff has Log4j in the vulnerable version. And we were focused on the open source stuff primarily at GitHub, but it's just astounding at that. So, as you guys look to triage without having that full visibility, have you guys sort of taken this approach of, okay, here are the crown jewels. We're going to put extra controls or extra lockdowns in place around that? Or have you guys just said, hey, we can patch what we can patch and let's see what comes?
Well, no, I mean, not the latter, right? I mean, this is an all out, all hands on deck approach, right? And I'm sure it is at most companies, right? It's bringing in the architecture and network based teams because there's a lot of network based countermeasures you can have to this particular thing, right? It's a prioritized approach. When you say crown jewels, I'm talking, to me, that's not data driven in this respect. It's exploit driven. So we're looking at, patch the DMZ with known vulnerabilities within X amount of time, right? And it doesn't really float in a zero trust world. I get it, but that's how we're prioritizing efforts. So I think that's the key aspect there. And then I think writ large, unfortunately, which hasn't really changed, is a general heightened alert and awareness, right? So we go back to the people side, right? Are we going to be taking the week off between, today and Christmas or between Christmas and New Year's? Probably not, right? I think from a team perspective, we need to understand that people need to get rest and do that things. But, vacations are generally going to be canceled or we're going to have to get people in and out because really that time to respond when the other shoe falls of that internet, exposed vulnerability with maybe perhaps, a certain exploit path, that time to respond is critical. And in that case, we need people on call pretty much all hours of the day, right? Not just ready to patch, but to process the news and the cyber intelligence as it comes in.
So,
I mean,
so
it's been every day, John, right? Every single day.
It's everything. But I want to pause on that because I actually think this is one of the secrets of sort of cybersecurity that doesn't come out. And this isn't the heart of my business, and I don't know it is the heart of your business per se, but it is a lot of the art to how somebody in your position has to take this on, right? You probably have a number of teams. You guys are now managing these comms. I'm sure you have systems to help you do that. But how do you just keep your people up for the fight? I mean, you can only ask people to skip so many holidays, to skip so many weekends before they're like, man, I got to find a new field. And I do think that wears on them. So is there something you guys are doing to sort of just keep everybody in the game?
Well, it starts by hiring the right people, right? There's no doubt, John, you love this stuff.
I'm a
right?
nerd. Yeah, I do. I'm always in the game. I'm like, oh yeah, let's go fight the bad guy.
I love this stuff, right? That doesn't mean I don't want a happy hour today on a Friday, right? I do. But I think it starts with your team and if you form your team appropriately and you find people who are passionate and have a true love of the game, right? And this is the game, right? This is the game.
Yeah.
So, when you have the right people, I have people on my team, and if they listen to this, they know exactly what I'm talking about, that I have to actually say, hey, step away. That's when I know I'm in a pretty good spot, right? Is, hey, take the night off, right? Because these people are so passionate. They're searching, they're processing the latest TTPs and indicators, and they're getting after it, right? I think that's what it starts with. Not everyone's kind of fortunate to have that sort of thing built in. I've been in this position for nearly 6.5 years, so I've been able to build that team. But I know most people in my position are a year and a half, something like that. I think in that respect, it sounds a little bit kind of standard these days, but leadership with empathy is a really powerful thing. But you can't begin to show empathy just in the midst of a crisis, right? You have to show empathy with your daily activities, particularly when there isn't a crisis. So that when there is a crisis, you can engage your team with the authenticity that's needed so that they know that you actually care and you understand what they're going through. I am not in a position to do the technical work. That's not really what I do, right? But I do feel that I've demonstrated to my team the empathy that I know that what it takes to do that, and trying to walk them out in their shoes and recognizing that, and then actively communicating that to them. I think that keeps the motivation up, right? Outside of just the standard stuff of bringing people in now, just stuff we've been doing for a long time.
Well,
Does
I
that,
think empathy
yeah,
is a big word, and it's going to be very interesting maybe with this next question. That so everybody and their brother creates software these days, right? I don't know how many unique pieces of software you guys keep on your network you utilize. I know we have clients that, on some count, 558,000 unique pieces of software, the very big organization.
yeah.
How, when you engage with your vendors, do you look at that? Is this like a, hey, I'm a major client, you better respond to me now? Or is like, hey, I understand you have everybody and your brother bothering you. And by the way, I'm sending this email to X number
Yeah.
of other hundreds or thousands of vendors.
Well, I don't think we take that relationship or size for granted. I think that's number one, right?
Mhm.
It's like, oh, big bad XYZ, pay attention to us, right? I think we have a great team to chip away at the problem, right? It's a massive problem. And you're just talking about, let's say, sanctions software that we know. You're not
Oh,
talking about shadow IT or other things that we need to discover, kind of in the nooks and crannies of the network there. Software, I think, particularly the subcomponents of software, is a huge issue, right? And from a supplier perspective, we leverage a number of different strategies, whether that's like large scale communications to major partners, of which I can say that, yeah, we've sent that letter. Am I confident that that letter is like the NLBO? Absolutely not. That's why I have to take the layered approach, right? Secondarily, we'll use different third party management, scoring services and things like that, that are rapidly trying to get their hands around this issue too. But we'll pull some intelligence from there, right?
mhm.
Is there a demonstrable exploit on a critical third party that does work with us? Should we engage that? I know that doesn't really answer the software question for you, but the moral of the story is there is not a perfect answer. I don't get I don't let myself get emotionally wrapped up in the fact that there isn't a perfect answer. I'm more confident in the fact that we have some sort of answer, right? And we have some layered answer and capabilities in the absence of a universal SBOM solution. We have those things ready to go. This one's unique though, because my end all be all would be go back to the source, which is the purchase of the software, right? If it's XYZ software, I know exactly where we buy it, right? We have those processes. You can't really do this with this one, right? It's just that's not the case. And unfortunately, this is, I think, the event that us in the cyber and people who are interested in SBOM community have kind of been like looking at as a really significant event, right? I mean, you had in May, the Biden came out with the SBOM and the executive order. I think that was very aggressive, right? I mean, it was needed but aggressive. And I think as we kind of go through this, it's like from May to now has been an educational experience. What is SBOM? Let's get behind it. Let's start talking about it. Let's start, branching out our thoughts and understanding what it could do. What transparency can it bring to us? How could it disrupt the vulnerability management space as we know it? And that's just one space it could disrupt. But now we're hit with this event. And in my opinion, 2022 is going to be like 2021 for that topic after the executive order, but throw a little bit of jet fuel on it, because this is certainly leaving a lot of people just sitting back saying, man, I wish I could determine my destiny, you know?
I can tell you from my side, obviously, the folks who are listening here know that Fortress is in the SBOM game, and we think we're the leaders of the SBOM game, but it's amazing. So we've had conversations with folks a year ago. They're like, that's interesting, but literally started getting calls Saturday night. Can you make
That's the
SBOM?
call we had, John, right? I mean, like, we've also had conversations around um, software bill of materials, really the timeline of its rollout, what it can offer. And, you know, honestly, I came away from most of those discussions, you know, my head was blowing up because I just couldn't wrap my head around a lot of it, but really how to actualize it in a company at scale. You know, that said, you know, we were going to lean in and, you know, we got to figure something out, particularly in the government contracting space. But now I think there's a greater impetus. There's just no doubt. To me, I see this as a greater impetus than SolarWinds, which is what caused the executive order in the first place. This
Yep.
one is definitely more illustrative of the need.
Well, you know, I talk to the folks that participate in the Solarium Commission all the time. Obviously, they had a huge hand in seeing that EO written and signed. And you know, if you talk to the executive director, retired Admiral Mark Montgomery, like he goes on. I mean, he's almost like I don't want to say this, it sounds bad, like a Cassandra, right? That Greek mythology, he's always telling you what's going to happen, and nobody listens because he hits these things on the head every time.
Yeah.
That's like I don't want really to talk to him this week because I'm certain he's going to tell me whatever's going to happen next. Because he had been telling us about this, really
Yeah.
just after the Solarium Commission was put together. Like, hey, this is going to happen someday. But my big concern, just like at a sort of geopolitical level, for those of us who work in the GovCon space, is that the adversaries have now seen this and are like, this is a really good idea, and now this is going to be a continuing issue. That they're going to try and come after the big government suppliers by just dunking on these ubiquitous software components because it leaves us all in this position of well, we're going to have to chase it around. I do think SBOM obviously will help, but I do think that really that changes the game.
I mean,
If
it
they're
changes the game across, like, you know, we all think about and have policies about how we consume open source software too, right? We all have these governance processes about it, right? And in the absence of limiting our ability to conduct business if we're in the software space or the services space, right, we have to have some hard discussions around things like that, open source and freeware software and things like that. Is the juice worth the squeeze at some point? uh, but again, it's not like that's where the problem exists, right? The problem exists in off-the-shelf software as well. So I think it takes a full reimagining, I think, and a different discussion on realized risk now, to your point, right? We've had a lot of people. I mean, same thing around like supply chain risk management in general, right? Since the Deliver Uncompromised report a few years ago, that's been an emerging topic for 2 years, of which, you know, SBOM and certain things are in there. I mean, I think this is a big emerging thing. But since this issue and obviously SolarWinds a year ago, you're really looking at realized risks and realized incidents, and how does that drastically change the conversation at the boardroom level to say we really need to reevaluate this and reimagine it, right? Like we need to get together and really talk about what we should be doing differently across the board.
that's
And because I don't think anyone's right now going to say this is an acceptable risk level. Not
I'm going to share with you something I say. I'm certain you have not heard me say this, but I say this all the time to policymakers when they lend me their ear. It's that CISOs aren't in charge of security. CFOs and CEOs are really in charge of security. It's how much room and how much
yeah,
budget do they give you to really impede on the business,
absolutely.
right? That's so. With that in mind, with that, it seems like you
No,
agree,
I
which is good.
agree
And so,
because cyber is a business risk, right? We're past the days of being like, oh, we need to get cyber in the boardroom. Okay, for a mature company that is in this space, cyber is in the boardroom. Cyber risk is looked at a business risk, just like financial risk, other risks, right?
mhm.
So to that measure, right, if you follow that line, then my job has really become, how do I best and simply communicate those risk-based decisions so that they can communicate that the risk trade-offs so that they can best make that informed business decision, right? Because we don't, and And then having John, and then having the emotional detachment from it to accept that decision, right? I think that's where the art comes into play of what you just said was you can't get upset if someone made a business decision when they had all the facts on the risks and blah 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 blah. But the fact of the matter, business must be conducted, right? And at some point in time, just like there's financial risk accepted, some cyber risk can be accepted. So that's how I measure success for myself, is looking myself in the mirror and saying, did I give all the information and did I present it in a way that's understandable, right? So that the best decision could be made in this risk space. So yeah, just a little comment on that because you hit on something I'm
You know,
passionate about.
well, this is it's so sort of prescient you put it that way, because we had some interesting conversations this week. We talked to two big competitors, global level companies this week, and it was with the really the executive teams, and one of them in this discussion was like, hey, we view ourselves as a very secure company. Clearly we can't be secure enough. Invest. Like we're moving forward, let's begin the process. We talked to their direct competitor. I mean, this was in like a day of each other. Their direct competitor, and they had a completely different tack, and it was really
Mm-hmm.
around the risk. And their view of it was the government hasn't mandated it, right? We're doing everything we can do with our scanners. We'd love to do it, but until it's a mandate, we're not doing it. And it was really interesting to see two different businesses
I would rather be
take a
on the
very
proactive
different
side of
tack.
whatever companies those were, right? Let's not overcomplicate it. Risk is risk is risk, right? You accept it, you buy it down, or you
Yep.
transfer it, right? There's no, that's really what it
Yep.
is. And if you look at that decision, right, like accept it, okay, right? That's a decision as long as all the facts are on the table. Buy it down is a completely business driven decision based on available investment, right? How good can you invest to buy it down? That's the fact of the matter. Transference is a different story, right? That's a whole different ball of wax. But when you look at those two decisions, really, it's a binary thing: accept or buy it down, right? Or pull investment back and deal with accepting it going up, right? And if we can figure that out. So, for me, this is going completely off topic, John. So I'm sorry, but for me, it's as cyber professionals, right? you know we now have the ability to choose our own destiny, particularly in these really hot market spaces like where we are in Washington DC metro or other places. So for me, I would always choose, as I have for the last 6.5 years, to be on the side of a management team that is significantly proactive on the cyber risk front, right? With again the knowledge and the understanding of different business drivers. That's just where I'm at.
I think, and I couldn't put my thumb on what for certain what led company one to be sort of more proactive and company two to be on the other side. My suspicion is actually their market position. So company one is a little bit smaller in the domestic markets here. And they're looking to be viewed as very secure, like, hey, you can trust us. We're a company that really comes with the oomph. Company two, I think, is a little bit more market dominant here, this
Mm-hmm.
DC area, and I think they feel like they've already earned that cred. That so maybe they don't have to make that type of
So
investment. And
two was
and
the
I
no
and I think you
investment
alluded to it
company, and
earlier.
one was the lean in company. Okay, that's
Yeah,
that's interesting,
yeah,
right? But so you're this is why I like talking with you, John, because you're a business driven guy, right? I'm more of I'd lean in with the heart, right? So I think there's another side to that, right? And that is the overall and overarching values a certain company has, right? And mixed with those different business drivers. So like our values are honesty, transparency, trust, and alignment, right? Let's pull out transparency. We're talking about software transparency. We're talking about the need to push that software transparency both internally and externally, right? So it's not a far leap to take our organizational values and link it to an effort such as software bill of materials and greater security in the software supply chain, right? Um, I will always choose, right? I see a lot of people in my industry like saying, "Wow, I don't know if we want that capability." I know in the back of their head they're saying, "I don't want that capability because I don't know exactly how to deal with the information or the output I get from it." But that to me is a completely backwards approach, right? There is no value, zero, in staying in the known unknown space, right? We can move up that curve and we can figure it out as we go along. That's just my 2 cents.
That so I think on the sort of business ethics piece of it, company one, uh, they, again, clearly their leadership has more of your
Yeah,
ethos on how they're particularly in the cyber group. They want to roll. They're a lead by the punches group, right? They want to roll. They want to fight. It's a like I have to win the mission. Company two is a business company. I mean, really, you could. It's not that they didn't know that. In fact, really, we got not far into the conversations with them, and they were like, we really understand. And the truth is, they did really understand, and they were calculating. They're like, we just don't care. It was, this is as far as we need to go to secure ourselves to the risk appetite we have, and that's really
that's
where it was.
cool.
But it has been very interesting in the industry to see companies have different
Yeah,
tacks on this, because some have been, as there's kind of that third camp. We have not run into them, but I think that's by virtue of what we do. The hey, we don't want to know crew, right? Because those folks don't want to get into a room with us, right? Because we're in the
yeah,
transparency business. I am here to show you things so you can make a
right.
decision about how you deal with it. That's so if you don't want to see those things, like we're like I feel like sometimes I feel like we're like the guy that comes through with like the blue light in the motel,
Right.
right? Like I'm going to show you all the. Do you really want to know? The thing is that in
It's
cyber,
it's an odd analogy, but I get where you're going for.
yeah, well, people don't want to know all the time.
Yeah,
I just think that we've kind of gotten to a place, and this is, I would say, the ethos of my company, right? Is
yeah,
if you don't, our founders, the two of them, one of them came to this country as a refugee from the Soviet Union, started with nothing, and is now, this is his fourth big company. The other one was children of Cuban immigrants. These are not guys that started with everything and just had it lapped. I mean,
yeah,
they really understood what it was like to live without freedom, both of them. And I think it has been a major part of how our company's built. They focused on this thing because they really feel like that in the cyberspace, if we give up the greatest medium for the expression of liberty and frankly for the development of money, right, to be prosperous, the internet, if we cede cyberspace to the people that attack us, that's a terrible loss. So
yeah.
it's I think it's in our view, right, that the transparency is key. But there are a lot of people out there still that are like, hey, I don't want to know. And when you said at the beginning of the conversation, hey, I think it'll be 2 or 3 years before SBOM or technologies like that become, the base in the industry. I think it's probably because of those people. But I'll tell you, I would be shocked if by the end of the next quarter, right? That so by the March April timeframe, there aren't a dramatic increase of companies who are just mandating we're going to have the S bombs from you.
When are we're going to get some sort of indication on contract rules at some point, right? It's in the executive order.
Yep.
And I think I think that will be a pretty significant driver of adoption, even if
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the fields of the SBOM are left TBD or blank, right? But that's not my concern. My concern is getting the infrastructure in place to generate, receive, adjudicate, and communicate what's in that SBOM, right?
Yep.
That's the processing of that, and either the investment in technology or the investment in manpower to get through that is probably the biggest thing, right? And usually with that, particularly in our industry, that takes some sort of act of regulation, some act within the FAR or the
Yeah.
DFAR. So I think it's not wise for companies to wait for that, right? Um, and if you're not leaning in now, I don't agree with your first quarter prognosis, right? But I do agree with the fact that I think there's going to be a significantly more interest in companies exploring what it looks like, right?
All right.
And I think you're going to have a bunch that say until there's a contract thing, we can't do it like the companies you described. But I think you're going to be too late if that's the case, right? And I think that's like consumer of SBOM, right? Like I'm the receiver of an
Mm-hmm.
SBOM. We've had a lot of conversations about that. Just full disclosure, just you and I just kind of rapping
Yep.
about it. What does that look like and all that stuff? But also, what does it mean for the vulnerability management industry, right?
Well, that's
Um,
what I would say, Mike. I have two hard questions for you. I would say both of these are really hard questions,
oh boy.
and maybe the sort of the closing two, right? And we'll give them to you at once, but we'll hopefully take them separately. So the first one is GDIT is in a very unique position as a company because
Yep.
you're the CISO and you're looking inward. Hey, I got to protect this house. you guys also produce a lot of things that go into critical infrastructure, particularly the government, right? That so
Mhm.
do you guys have a sense of, okay, we need the technology inward. Now we have to think about how we're doing that. Is that a
Yeah.
discussion that comes up?
That's not a hard question whatsoever. No, I think we have a commitment to demonstrating these processes within our company, as it relates to the services we provide. We call it customer zero here at GDIT, but oftentimes, like, I don't want to, not a negative connotation of a test bed because it's not a test environment, but we generally do things ourselves, you know, not a good analogy as yours, eat our own dog food or drink our own champagne, right? Before we go out and do that. And we can figure out what works and what doesn't work, particularly on a commercial enterprise network as opposed to a customer network. Best example of that is our zero trust story right now, right? We're way down the zero trust line. We're completely aligned with what our customer, facing suite of products and processes are, similar to like EDR or the consumption of cyber threat intelligence, all examples of customer zero. And SBOM is going to be no different, right? If I'm not on the leading edge of that in terms of what does it look like and how do we deliver it far ahead of our requirement to actually deliver it, then I feel like I've fallen a little short, right?
So that one wasn't easy. What wasn't hard then? Maybe this one will also be easy. We'll see.
We'll figure it out.
That's so. I always like to ask people to give me the crystal ball, right? Like give me a year out. Tell me what the world likes like a year out. But this is why this is a hard question, is because these things are recorded, right? And we'll go
Yeah.
back and look and see how well you did. So next time I talk to you
Okay.
on one of these, I'm going to come back. We're going to compare, and we're going to
Do it.
see if you are in fact a Nostradamus or not. That's so. 1 year out, what do we look like next Christmas?
In the software space?
In our space, in the
Yeah,
cybersecurity
in the
software
whole
space.
space.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I'm Nostradamus by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't think we're going to come back together and say this has gotten any easier. I think we're going to come together and say, and this has gotten significantly harder and significantly more complex, right? We were chugging along there for a while. It's not to say we didn't have some really bad things going on. Like we had a string of incidents and gnarly malware and stuff like that, and nation state campaigns and all that jazz. But 2021 has demonstrated, whether it's geopolitically or just where we're going as a world and how we leverage cyber and kind of the world stage. I think we've been demonstrating here that just the threat profile is extreme. And look, that's not a Nostradamus statement, that's a Captain Obvious statement. But is that going to go away in 2022? Absolutely not, right? So when we look at the roadmap of what are we going to do, I had already kind of mentioned, let's rethink and challenge our own hubris. I think that's number one, right? We companies have we've had good programs, right? There's no doubt, like we have good mature programs by any stretch of the frameworks that are out there. But I think we need to have a no BS conversation where we all come together within a company and even within the industry and say, where can we challenge our own pride in these programs, right? How can we kind of model significantly more complex threat actor activity, and how do we work that into our thing? How can we go a little bit more out on a ledge, or out on the limb there, in terms of some of these things that we need to start getting ahead of rather than just waiting for it to come to us. And I think that's what 2022 is going to be marked by. The only hamper to that, or things are going to take away, is going to be the fact that we're probably going to have to staff up too, right? And in order to have some of those discussions, those future focused discussions and capability discussions, we're going to need to have more operators to manage the threats that are being realized, along with more thinkers. So we have a tug of war here in terms of the availability of talent and what we really need to do to meet the threat. So really long answer, mostly Captain Obvious as opposed to Nostradamus, but that's really what's driving me into the new year.
Well, I've put you to the question. I will give, I think, two things that I think are going to change. We'll come back and measure, right? Because yours is very,
Okay.
stays the same, have to grow the teams. I think
Well, I said a little more than that. I said things like challenge the the
Well,
pride of what we have in
that's
our
that
program.
part. That part is actually where I'm going to drive on it. I concur that that needs to happen. I don't know that it will happen, but I would say by Christmas of next year that there will be one or more serious regulation about reporting that will be out, and then we'll all be
No,
abiding by.
that's Captain Obvious too, John.
Oh, I
That's
don't
all
think
over the
so.
news.
It
That's
didn't get
all
it
over
didn't
the news.
pass the NDAA.
Is
It
it
didn't pass the
24 hours or
oh,
72 hours or 48 hours or 1 hour?
neither one of them got through the NDAA. That's the only bill they
But
ever passed consistently.
I'm not going to bet against you for that prediction. I absolutely think that one's coming out. And I think we all, like, here in the DoD space, we're generally aligned on 72 hours, but I think we all need to be prepared for it's quick as a day, which is going to be,
Well, so
which is going to be hard.
this is the second one. This is the second one. This is a grander prediction. I admit I could be
Okay.
completely wrong on this, but
Okay.
I think if you're a weapon system builder, Christmas of next year, not the delivery, but the ask, the DoD will now be. They'll say, "Hey, we're going to want your SBOMs for the weapon systems." I think that's where they're going to start, and I think the
1
ask
year.
will come a year today.
That's a tougher one, right? Because you have to go through the rulemaking process,
It's a
right?
tough one.
Which is a tough one. So I don't know. I may take you on that. I think, okay, what I'll say is, while the delivery may not be there contractually, the expectation and or the ability to differentiate yourself in the market will be there.
Well, that's
That's what I think.
we have it recorded now. We will see. Mike,
I
I
love that.
want to thank you for taking this time with us. I know it's crazy for you
Absolutely.
guys at the moment, but it's really helpful to get folks in your seat to share while they're in the middle of the fight. So
Yeah.
really grateful for
And
you to come
I
down.
know you guys are just as busy, and your product, along with other products in the industry, right? You guys are leading edge, so you're doing great stuff. So it's great to call you a friend and your team an ally here in this fight. So thanks for having me on.
Hey, cheers.